Good morning. Thank you for joining us at today's Entrepreneurship Issue Forum, The Power of Partnership, Forming Strong Research and Community Partnerships. There are a lot of documented benefits to engaged research approaches. Engaged research, which includes community-engaged research, research practice partnerships, and research co-production methodologies, have been shown to produce research findings that are often more reflective of communities themselves. Further, we know that research conducted in partnership between researchers and community members more often results in programs and interventions that communities themselves define as useful and usable. And importantly, we know that engaged research is one way that researchers can help rebuild trust and reciprocity with communities who have too often experienced harm and extraction in the research process. Despite all of these documented benefits, researchers who hope to engage communities in knowledge production face a lot of barriers. One of these barriers, the topic of today's discussion, is that both researchers and community leaders often have a hard time finding resources or models that demonstrate what it would look like to initiate and sustain an engaged research partnership. Our panelists today have valuable experience to share in this arena. Our guests comprise Kauffman's 2021 Community Engaged Research Cohort. This funding call was our first investment in supporting and learning from researchers who study entrepreneurship and innovation using community-engaged approaches. Though we also now support community-engaged researchers in a number of our other portfolios, namely our 2022 Inclusive Ecosystems and our 2022 Knowledge Challenge funding calls. Grantees in this original cohort, however, agreed to study a question related to equity in entrepreneurship using a community-engaged approach. And they also agreed to participate in a 3-year-long peer learning cohort designed to surface and share insights from their work throughout the field. We're really excited to introduce these grantees to you today. While many of their teams are quite large, we've asked them to bring one community and one researcher representative to speak at today's forum. You can expect to hear more from these teams over the next couple of years through upcoming reports and future forums, as we elevate what they're surfacing in terms of the value of community-engaged approaches in better understanding entrepreneurship and innovation. And one final note before I kick us off, these issue forums are a series that we host in order to bring research, practice, and policy together, and they focus on a specific topic about entrepreneurship. As a reminder, with every forum, the Kauffman Foundation takes no legislative or political position on these discussions. And with that, I'd like to turn our attention to our panelists, who will begin today's conversation by introducing themselves and giving a brief overview of the focus of their research. After these introductions, we'll then engage in a roundtable discussion about engaged research, focusing specifically on questions around partnership, capacity development, and reciprocity in this work. We'd also love to engage in any questions the audience may have. So as we chat, please feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A box, and I'll surface those during our roundtable discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our guests today. And I believe we're starting with a team from the McNair Center for Entrepreneurship and Economic Growth, Alisha and Deloyd Parker.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for the opportunity today to speak. My name is Alisha Small. I'm with the McNair Center for Entrepreneurship and Economic Growth, and this is my community partner.
Deloyd Parker.
Yes, and we're here today to share about our project. What we're looking at is the impact of urban revitalization on small businesses within the 3rd Ward and the 2nd Ward communities of Houston, Texas. And in our first phase of this, we are focusing on the 3rd Ward. And the goal of the research is to really to be able to quantitatively measure and compare the economic success of small businesses within a certain time period, and to identify factors that actually have had an impact on the success of small businesses within this community during a time of gentrification and change. Also, our goal is to produce public policy recommendations for or in support of small businesses based on their viewpoint. And we wanted to deliver some tangible community-directed products as a result of this research. And so as an example of those types of products, we're doing survey and focus groups. And that is with community research assistants who are from the community. Again, with that goal of investing in people within the community. Another piece of it is an online directory. We also want to have a place to promote business in the community, as well as a historical map to show the change over time. And that will be an online map visualization that will be dynamic. And finally, we want to have a data walk community event that will showcase everything back to the community and get their perspective.
Okay. And community relationships is key. Trust is the most important factor that allows you to develop those objectives that Sister Alisha has just addressed. Trust is a major factor. My name is Deloyd Parker, and like I said earlier, I've been executive director of Shipp, co-founder for 53 years now. I've been here, and Shipp Center is dealing with family strengthening and empowerment. Our focus is we have a very positive image in our community, and the partnership that we engage in with the foundation is a healthy partnership. We're excited about it, but most importantly is we have to understand. We understand that trust is a key factor. If you don't have trust, you won't have a successful and objective and a truthful research team. So trust is what we work with. And having been in the community for forever and a day, Shipp Community Center, as I stated before, we've been around for over 53 years. Overall focus is dealing with family strengthening and empowerment and economic development, cooperative economics. We say Ujamaa. Collect cooperative economics is what we embrace at Shipp and in the community. And our center acts as a conduit to promote that with restaurants, with business, with different kinds of organizations. So we're excited about that. We're also excited about being allowed to participate in this process. I wonder whether I'm qualified. But thank you very much. That's it.
I'm Sigmund Shipp, and I teach at Hunter College. I'm here with my community partner, Gretchen Susi. I work with Laura Wolf Powers. She and I are from Hunter College, and we have partnered with the Brooklyn Communities Collaborative, a consortium of Brooklyn-based hospitals and community organizations on this research project. We are using a community-engaged participatory action research methodology. The research focuses on Black businesses in the Brooklyn communities of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brownsville, and East New York. The research goals are to analyze the environment for local Black-owned businesses and to generate ideas for how to improve them. Our more specific focus is on supplier diversity programs in general and between local hospitals and Black businesses. We are also interested in, one, intermediary organizations that are involved in supplier diversity efforts, young aspirational Black entrepreneurs. We have conducted focus groups to hear their voices. Our next steps, we will continue data collection until December 2022. In January, we will convene a data walk and a celebration for project participants, local businesses, intermediaries, and inspiring entrepreneurs. With that, I will turn my attention to hear from Gretchen Susi.
My name is Gretchen Susi. I'm the Deputy Director of Brooklyn Communities Collaborative, and Brooklyn Communities Collaborative focuses on building health, wealth, civic infrastructure, and equity in Brooklyn neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods, as Professor Shipp said, of Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, East New York, and Canarsie. And BCC was born from the struggle to keep safety net hospitals open in some of Brooklyn's poorest neighborhoods, and has been built on a foundation of participatory action research. And we focus on leveraging the power of anchor institutions and the knowledge of community members, and we convene and support stakeholders like community-based organizations, economic development corporations, government, as many healthcare institutions as possible in Brooklyn, labor unions, and colleges, universities, and high school, especially the City University of New York system. And we work on collaboration, integration of services, building resources for the organizations and also for communities, and also on informing the policies and practices that most affect health and well-being. And our North Star really, and what we're looking at with our project with Professor Shipp and Laura Wolf Powers is worker ownership of the hospital and the healthcare supply chain in Brooklyn. And so there are many steps to get to that, and that's a lot of what we're learning about and figuring out the best ways to go about it. So thanks again, everyone.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Elsie Harper-Anderson, and I am a faculty member at Virginia Commonwealth University in the Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs. My community partner is Del Fickett, who helped to found RVA Works, and is also a professor at the University of Richmond. So the purpose of our project is to understand the everyday lived experience of entrepreneurs in the Richmond entrepreneurial ecosystem, comparing the experiences of historically disadvantaged groups, including Blacks and Latinos, to the experiences of whites, using qualitative weekly diaries and bi-monthly interviews. So our project will include 40 entrepreneurs, mostly Black, some Latinos, and also some whites. They will submit weekly journals for an entire year. And the journals will cover things such as their goals, their strategies for success, their barriers, their networks, and where they get support from, and reflection on their entrepreneurial experience from week to week. In addition to the journals, every other month, our entrepreneurs will participate in an interview with the researchers to talk about their experiences in this ecosystem. Our goal is, at the end of the year and collecting the data, to have a community-wide forum where we will include policymakers, entrepreneurial support organizations, and entrepreneurs themselves. And what we hope to come out of that community forum is a working group for our ecosystem that is focused on equity. We have engaged our partners in this project in several ways. First of all, as I mentioned in the beginning, our key community partner is RVA Works. And RVA Works has helped us to recruit entrepreneurs and to find entrepreneurs who wouldn't probably normally hear about a study like this and may be shy to participate. We also involved local entrepreneurs in the designing of the data collection instrument. We held focus groups where they were able to weigh in and give ideas, and they also tested the instrument for us before we got started. Other community partners have helped us by distributing our announcement and helping us to recruit participants. They will also weigh in as we analyze the data and give feedback on that. The study participants will also help design questions for us to interview other stakeholders in the ecosystem based on their experiences. And a little shift that we made. We always planned on having a symposium at the end, but as we've gone through this process and understood some of the other initiatives that are happening in Richmond, have decided to join with some of our partners in the ecosystem and putting on the symposium as a joint effort. So that's a little overview. I look forward to talking to you all more in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsie. Now we have Jacob Wagner and Pedro Zamora from UMKC Center for Neighborhood.
Good morning, Jacob Wagner here from the University of Missouri, Kansas City in Urban Planning and Design. And our research is focused on what we call everyday entrepreneurship in the neighborhoods that we work with through the Center for Neighborhoods. I'm joined today by Pedro Zamora from Hispanic Economic Development Corporation based here in Kansas City, Missouri on the west side. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we've done over the last year. The work has been mainly focused on the conditions in many of our commercial districts in diverse neighborhoods, mostly African American and Hispanic neighborhoods here in Kansas City. The Center for Neighborhoods provides the context for this research. So we were founded in 2015, opened our doors in 2016, and over the past 6 years, we've worked with over 200 neighborhood leaders from 80 different unique organizations in Kansas City, Missouri. For context, the city has about 240 officially recognized neighborhoods by the planning department. So we're interested very much in business activity on entrepreneurship in the neighborhoods that we work with. And some of our neighborhood leaders are entrepreneurs. They are artists, musicians, they might be farmers and growers, they might cut hair, do hair, they may run a childcare or a daycare in the neighborhood. So we're interested in that dynamic between neighborhood conditions, neighborhood leadership, and entrepreneurship in Kansas City. So entrepreneurs are really important to neighborhoods, but neighborhoods are also more than just a context. They're actually part of the obstacles and opportunities that entrepreneurs in Kansas City face. So we've begun by looking at mobilizing our neighborhood leaders. We've hosted several neighborhood business nights. We've done existing asset walks where we get out and walk the commercial districts and talk with neighborhood businesses and really see the conditions on the ground. And we're doing all of that to really build our network of the folks that then we want to follow up and do more interviews with and talk with about the work. I would say one of the things that's also a little bit distinguishing about our work here at UMKC is we're actually neighbors with the Kauffman Foundation. So the Kauffman Foundation is literally across the street from the UMKC Center for Neighborhoods. So that creates a different kind of a dynamic. But we're very excited about being part of this research, and we're super excited to work with Pedro Zamora, who we worked with on and off for the past 6 years, both from the neighborhood perspective with Sacred Heart on the west side and with the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation. So Pedro, if you want to just share a little bit about HEDC.
Thank you, Professor Wagner. Pedro Zamora, Executive Director, longtime resident of Kansas City and an entrepreneur myself. I have the distinct honor to serve the Latino community and the limited English-speaking communities of Kansas City, and we add in the low to moderate income individuals. Prior to our mission statement that states that we solely look at building wealth and by creating entrepreneurship and wealth attainment in the Latino settled communities, we realized they weren't just alone in these communities. So we've expanded our mission to include the low to moderate income in order to achieve true community engagement and elevating all lives that are living in a community. We focus on everything from entrepreneurship, startup, all the way to capitalization. We're just unique in a way. We're a community development corporation, and we also are a community development financial institution. We created an ecosystem within the ecosystem of Kansas City to help us achieve helping low to moderate individuals reach their dreams and economic sustainability.
Now we have Julie Hoy and Lutalo Sanifu from University of Michigan and Jefferson East.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Hoy. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Michigan School of Information, and I'm joined with our community partner, Lutalo Sanifu, the Director of Neighborhood Resilience, Safety, and Business District Services at Jefferson East Incorporated in Detroit. So the project that we're working on is called the Community Tech Worker Project, an initiative to provide technology support to small businesses on Detroit's east side. The idea is built on the widely used community health worker model, which has shown the value of having members of the community serve as local experts and intermediaries to provide, say, health guidance or help residents connect with more formal systems like hospitals and doctors. But in this project, we're kind of testing out this model in the technology space by following a community-based participatory research approach, specifically to support small businesses with their technology needs. So like setting up a website or helping set up ads, etc. So far, we've hired 5 young adults to become community tech workers on Detroit's East Side, which primarily serves Black entrepreneurs. And we've trained the community tech workers on the top technology interests of local businesses and had them set up one-on-one appointments in person and online. So we're expecting that this model will not only support businesses, but also provide career opportunities for the tech workers so that they can build their own skills in order to pursue jobs in a technology field. So I'll leave it to Lou, our community partner, to provide detail on the day-to-day operations and how business support has been going so far.
Thank you, Julie. As Julie mentioned, our tech workers are a mixed team, some community members and some university students. What we have found is that they're working very well together. We started out this project with them working in pairs, working with business owners directly. And now they're even working online, doing virtual support and developing their own entrepreneurial spirit, if you will. Some of our top requests have been brand development, website services, point of sale, but they've also done things like help with phone operating services, social media marketing, and the like. They're averaging about 5 hours per client in one-on-one support. There's about 24 businesses that have been fully supported to date. We're looking to uptick that. We had an extensive training on the front end to fully support the students and community members. And some of the feedback we've been getting from business owners has been excellent. Some of them have talked about how they weren't even familiar with some of the systems. They didn't even know what to ask for. So it's actually been really wonderful. The Alian Richardson from Nyla's Jar said, great with helping me navigate towards my goal as an entrepreneur, as an example. So our community has gotten a lot from this venture, and we're looking at Jefferson East to extend this beyond the period that we have to date.
Thank you both. Now we have Mr. Udayan Tandon and Mikaiil Hussein from UCSD and United Taxi Workers San Diego.
Yeah, hi, I'm Udayan. I'm a PhD student at the Just Transitions Initiative at the UCSD Design Lab, and I'm here with my community partner, Mikaiil Hussein from United Taxi Workers San Diego. And I'm going to ask Mikaiil to start us off with some background on United Taxi Workers San Diego.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you. Good morning, all. My name is Mikaiil Hussein. I'm the Executive Director for United Taxi Workers of San Diego. UTWSD is an organization formed back in December 2009 when a group of workers get together and fighting about the respect and dignity of their workplace. I was very fortunate to be chief negotiator at that time. We had issues such as the lease we paid, over regulation. We had about lack of representation about the industry. We are majority of 95%. We have police issue. We have so many issues. We recorded 20 plus issue. The major one lifting the cab permit for San Diego, and also the second one was also uplifting drivers for San Diego Airport too. We are very fortunate over the past 13 years. We achieved most of the thing. Right now we are fighting innovation, how we can bring business to the drivers and to compete Uber and Lyft. I wanna give it to Udayan. Go ahead, Udayan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mikaiil. So our project examines the assets and barriers faced by community technology innovators developing self-sustaining business models that equitably support workers in an ecology of institutions and policies not optimized to support them. Members from the Just Transitions Initiative at the UCSD Design Lab work alongside United Taxi Workers San Diego as they implement a visionary pilot to integrate taxis as a flexible first last mile solution to strengthen public transit in the city of San Diego. Through our work, we draw on activity theory methodologies in which researchers support individual and organizational development as a way of documenting and analyzing their transformational process. Specifically, we work towards transforming the taxi industry towards a democratically controlled publicly regulated, and just workplace for taxi drivers. Through not just research methods like co-design workshop and semi-structured interviews, but also policy work with elected officials and staff, and building alternative institutions like a taxi worker cooperative in San Diego. And Mikaiil and I, we are here representing the joint work of a project team that includes Peter Zishi, Aisha Warsame, and William Johnson from United Taxi Workers San Diego, and Dr. Lily Rani, Dr. Vera Hovanskaya, Enrique Arcia, Brian Gorman, and Patrick Wong from UCSD. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome all of our speakers to turn their cameras back on and join us in roundtable discussion. And a reminder to our guests, if you have questions while we're talking, please drop those in the chat and we can address them. But I want to start out with a question for everyone that I think many here will be interested in hearing. I think depending on discipline and background, folks may or may not have any exposure to what community engaged research is. And every one of your project teams is drawing on a different tradition of that work. Some of you are doing participatory action research. Some of you are doing community-based participatory research. My question is, how did you first hear about community engaged approaches within research? How did you gain competency in that work? And what did that look like for you, both as a researcher and for community partners? Had you heard about this approach to research before? And what were your first thoughts when thinking about this approach? And I'll open that up to anybody who might be interested to hop in. Alisha, you are muted.
Yeah, muted.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, I think I can chime in a little bit on that from my perspective. This is actually my first experience with a community engaged research initiative and project. And in my previous work, it was doing data collection from for a national statistic that was more an in and out process within, a greater community, a large community. But with the Kauffman research initiative, it's a more strategic, targeted approach. And this community engagement really stood out to me as a great opportunity to take the skills that I had from a previous type of field research and apply that within specific communities, specifically the third ward, which is predominantly African American, and the second ward, and which is the Latino Hispanic neighborhoods of the Houston area. So that's kind of the approach. But again, it was one of those, I see a great opportunity to do something different. And so I'm very excited to be doing it in this format.
I'll weigh in and say that as an urban planner, my home department is urban planning. Community engagement is a natural part of urban planning and a large part of how we do our work. Before I came to academia, I worked for city government and doing a lot of community development type work. So having worked with community-based organizations quite a bit, and also having worked with community residents quite a bit. But in academia, outside of the practice, I haven't done a lot of community engaged work. So I think, doing this community engaged work on entrepreneurship is new to me. And I will say that it was kind of the thought is kind of scary in the beginning. Because you want to make sure that you are going into the community and being respectful, and all of the things that we talk about in terms of making sure that we give back and not just drain and the community. All of those things were important. And I can say immediately before I started this project, I was part of the community wealth building on the advisory board of the Community Wealth Building Initiative here in Richmond. And that's all about community. It wasn't research per se, but I was very cognizant and aware. It was top of mind, all of the issues in the community and also the community's feelings about researchers coming in. So all of that made me really think through how I was going to approach the community and engage with them in the most respectful way.
Yeah, for us, UTWSD, we actually started back in 2012 as a project. Law student, one of the partner moved to the University of San Diego, and she take about our Ordinance 11 issue, and this is amazing. We developed a paper called Safe Cap San Diego, and that project with the student for San Diego State, we took to the CBI. Later on, we make Driven to Despair. And that alone, when Driven to Despair came out in 2013 with the CBI, Center Policy Initiative, and San Diego State University 2013, it became a policy reform, actually changed entire taxi industry overhaul. And we lift the cap on 2014. For us, we were upfront on those fields, actually, and we were very fortunate over the years. Udayan, you want to add something?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add, like, I think my own journey to community engaged research. I think I was trained as a computer scientist, taught to build and program software uncritically. And I found myself working at a big technology company where somehow I was in a project that was actually building software in a community engaged manner. But there, for the first time, I witnessed this tension between what happens when the goal and priorities of the technology company diverges from the goals and priorities of the community. When they're not in alignment, I noticed that almost all the time, the technology company's goals and priorities were being prioritized. And when I entered academia, I think one of my intentions was to understand why this is happening. And I think my first sort of 3 months here, I was fortunate enough to be rotating with Lily, where Lily was working with United Taxi Workers San Diego, and we were developing a workshop for drivers to talk about what should be the future of taxis in San Diego. And in that, I kind of became aware of this spectrum of community engaged research where being community driven and community accountable lies on one end of the spectrum that actually spoke to the values that I wanted to be in alignment with. And that's how I sort of started and kept working with United Taxi Workers San Diego.
Yeah, I'm also happy to share my experience. We're lucky that there's at least 2 centers on campus that have been really pushing for more community engaged research. And so they would kind of compile case studies from across campus and describe how that's been going. And I found that really helpful. I think when I first started out, I thought community engaged research meant engaging the community at every single decision. But then I started to learn to see that it's significant labor to be a community partner in these projects. And I think that's something that I'm trying to better understand, which is how do you do these partnerships in an effective way that benefits everyone, but also doesn't provide all this additional work when their workload is already just so much. So that's something I'm trying to learn more about.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Community engaged research. I didn't learn about it per se until I started this project, but the fortunate thing is that we've partnered, when I say we, Lord Wolf Powers and myself as co-PIs, have partnered with Gretchen Susi and her organization, Brooklyn Communities Collaborative, and they have a deep respect and a deep history about the meaningfulness of participatory action research. And as a result of that partnership, I gained firsthand knowledge about what that meant. And I would wonder if Gretchen can say something about the PARS, which is the participatory action research, which is the hallmark of what they're doing in Brooklyn.
Sure. So I was gonna say that my my own personal exposure to participatory action research came in the mid 1990s when I started graduate school, and I was working as a research assistant on a project on how to build social capital in public housing in East Harlem and the South Bronx. And it was, it became very clear. It was a lot we worked with residents to develop surveys and conduct surveys, and it became very clear that it was a very efficient, not always expectally efficient, but really when you wanted to get to the root of something, a very efficient way of building the knowledge of because all the welfare reform and attacks on public housing were happening at that time. It was a good way to also inform residents and to have venues for developing immediate action, and then it developed a longer term civic infrastructure, and because it really has a real galvanizing effect both in the immediate and longer terms if it can be kept up. And so the researchers who I was working with all those years ago are still part of this research that's happening here in Brooklyn and in the Bronx. And when there was this crisis in Brooklyn of all of the safety net hospitals in Central and East Brooklyn were on the verge of closing, and these researchers came in and started working with the community. They had long-term relationships with them because they had worked on electing David Dinkins, the first Black mayor of New York City. They had all been working together on that. And so we're able to pull together these participatory action research projects with the high schools and colleges in Central and East Brooklyn. And so, from 2016 until the pandemic, really, where we had to scale the participatory action research projects down, we would have teams of about 50 students who would go out into the neighborhood and gather information about what people thought would be the thing that would most affect and improve health in their neighborhoods. And it was always about housing and economic opportunity. And so that in a lot of ways, led to the project that we're doing now. But the leaders of this project always envisioned this sort of anchor institution project and the idea of localizing hiring and purchasing here in Brooklyn and in the region. So I hope that wasn't too long, but that's sort of the roots, the root, and then it has grown over time to include many more people than are usually able to be included in projects like this.
Yeah, to be very clear and frank with you, it was very difficult for me to make the decision to engage in this process. I had to know more than what I usually am known. This community is the most researched community in the world. I mean, Third Ward, Houston, it's the most researched, and I have to be careful because there are a lot of ulterior motives that people engage in research for. And I had to be aware of that and careful of that. So I had to trust. The first word I used in this initial discussion was trust. I had to trust those involved in the process, and I had to trust them, and I had to know that it was for the greater good, not for the good of one individual or one group. And since I know Alisha, I know her background. I don't just know the background of the project, but I know her background. I know this community. I live in this community. I can see a person who has other motives when they appear. I decided to move on this and join her in this partnership because I trusted her. I had faith and trust, and I believe that this would be beneficial to the community if used properly and I believe that. So again, trust was a major factor in me moving forward on this. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Can I add?
Yes,
Can
sir.
I add to that? We have encountered resistance based on the feeling of mistrust and being guinea pigs in terms of the Black community, and we have worked feverishly to try to minimize that sentiment. One of the things that we plan to do in that regard, in terms of next steps, and I mentioned it, is to have a data wall which will allow the community to embrace what we have found, to comment on what we have found, to bring insight to what we have found. And we're also planning a celebration uh, to thank the people who have participated, because we think that makes us less seen as extractive agents who are feathering our own nest to the disregard of the community that we're looking at. And so that guiding ethos is what we are relying on as we develop this research and take our next steps.
That's right.
Lutalo, I know you've been waiting to hop in.
Thank you so much. Jefferson East actually has a history of working with the community. We've been doing in certain neighborhoods, we've been doing master planning exercises where we've had thousands of participants speak up and talk about what they want to see in the neighborhoods, working with small businesses, working with neighborhood residents to secure the type of resources that they need for housing, et cetera. And so it made perfect sense when the university came to us talking about this particular process, because we wanted to make sure that they did get the research information that they needed and this valuable research. But at the same time, community members are always going to ask, and business owners are always going to ask, what's in it for me? And this was an opportunity to actually provide services for them. So it's not just the research. On the other side of that, it's what are they getting? And some of them now are more savvy, more tech savvy than they were before. And in the process of helping them to get that tech savvy, we were also able to point them to other grant-related resources, to other organizations within our New Economy Initiative cohort, just to help businesses to expand and grow. So the main part for us is honestly, how is this research helping the business owner and ultimately helping the community? And through this, not only has the business owner been able to get the resources, but even the community tech workers themselves have now taken on more of an entrepreneurial spirit. They're actually talking about what kind of businesses can spin off from this for them.
I'll just jump in quickly on this question about community engaged research and getting introduced to it. I would say I agree with Dr. Harper-Anderson that many urban planning programs expect an ethic of community engagement, but that came from a long history of trauma. Communities of color, communities of concern, Black and Hispanic communities that were disproportionately impacted by everything from redlining to urban renewals. And so there is a lot of distrust. Even when you've been working with the community, they should always ask you, what are you doing? What is this for? When we did our neighborhood business night, one of our neighborhood leaders and one of the neighborhood business owners said, what's the end game? So there's always those questions. I agree with Mr. Parker down there in Houston that, many communities see themselves as overstudied, overplanned, and they get the plans and the studies, but they don't necessarily access the resources to then do what they want to do in their communities. And so there is this context of inequity and racial inequality with the businesses that many of us are working with. I would say the community taught me how to be a community researcher. When I think back to the lessons I've learned, it was always from the community. Really, you could take a class in it. That's not the same thing as having the community really test you and see how long are you here for, what's the purposes of your research, and should I even get involved with you? And so there's always a test there in terms of the commitment that a particular researcher has for a community. I just want to give a shout out to the Center for Neighborhoods. Everybody can wave their hand there. Everybody's here with us, and so it's great to be here.
Thank you.
Well,
Oh,
just
Pedro, sorry.
to add into what Professor Wagner was saying, he mentioned we have a 6-year relationship with the university, and that relationship allowed us to take students through a capstone project and bring them into the community so they can understand and participate with some community-based designing. That was the foundation of showing the equitable assets that are in the community and what's absent in the community. And publishing reports and studies like those are very important for community-based organizations to leverage those relationships. It's hard to compete on a grant by grant basis. It just doesn't, it's competition. But when we work with the university and we have a significant amount of data that we've collected in participation with students that make the storyline relevant, it makes it a lot easier for community-based organizations to go after the necessary matching grant dollars because of the work that the university provided with us. One particular scenario for us was we studied a group of individuals in a community that has very little resources. It's 62 different nations represented in Kansas City along a business corridor. Just west of one dividing street, they had federal, state, and local and philanthropic dollars to revitalize that neighborhood. East, they got zero. As just another 4 blocks down from them, they had an enhanced economic development tax approved by the city. But so this section of immigrants had no voice, had no additional income opportunities. But when we sat down and visited with them and they started telling their story from the ground up, whatever language they wanted to do, whatever media they wanted to select to use, that became real. It became real enough to where we consolidated that information and we sent it to their leaders in the community. It was tough. The leaders were upset that we didn't go to the leaders. We went to the people, the leaders, then it went to the politicians. Checking the time of each politician using technology, their time that they spent evaluating the report that we just generated was very interesting. The politicians spent less time evaluating how happy their constituents were. So there's a trust factor, there's my voice is heard factor, and what are we going to do next factor is what we're taking in this process here. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. I want to move us along since we have some really good questions in the chat, and I'm going to ladder them up and start with the basics first, maybe. One question, is there an option for us to read through these community engaged research proposals? Love to learn more about how these ideas were executed. And I think this touches on sort of the theme of today. Folks really don't have a clear sense of like how partnerships are formed. If you're a community partner or you're a researcher and you're thinking about studying a certain question or addressing a certain problem, how like tangibly did you go about thinking through how to bring in the right folks, how to think about, are you asking the right questions together? How did you manage partnership duties? And I know we're all figuring that out as we go. And Gretchen, you already touched a little bit on the lineage of how this has worked for you. So, but I'd love to open this up to everyone else to just talk a little bit about the beginnings and the origins of this research project and this partnership, and how you thought about making this work.
I'll just say for my research partner, we had not worked on a project before, but we had been thought partners for a number of years. We talked a lot together about entrepreneurship and about what was going on in his program, what my research was, and really, really deep conversations and thoughts and pushing each other's knowledge along and thinking along. So my partner was his organization was servicing a group of entrepreneurs that were the direct target of the research that I wanted to do. So RVA Works made a great partner for recruitment and also for helping to get the word out in the community. So yeah, that longer relationship led to a partnership.
Having an opportunity to work with the Center for Neighborhoods a part of UMKC, they're building leaders within the community, organizing neighborhood associations, teaching them the language that's necessary to help them communicate with the city council, and city planners. They have their language, and when they approach the immigrant limited English speaking communities that we work in, it's already a disadvantage. And then it's a hierarchical structure. Center for Neighborhoods was the launching pad for many of our entrepreneurs who are from the neighborhoods that we're trying to stabilize and sustain. Add this project on when Professor Wagner asked me if I would be willing to bring and engage some of our clients in what we're doing. We're coming out of a pandemic, and there's so much of inequities that we saw through the pandemic, especially access to capital, access to entrepreneurship-based programs in the native languages, because what happened in the communities that we serve, the trust was broken because there was a leadership structure that just fell apart. Everybody went into the denial that COVID was real. The timing was perfect because of the ability to re-engage clients that when they started lifting up the restrictions, we did a community walk very early in this project, and to just see people out talking and understanding that, okay, now you need to start contributing to the work that you're doing so we can start getting access to capital, access to a voice that needs to be built. That's what we're taking away from this. We're taking the language that's necessary for a developer. And I think this group is working, we're all working as developers now, helping the low to moderate income minority communities to understand what a developer sees in their eyes when they look at our communities. If they want to gentrify it, if they want to displace, but now they have those same words that they can communicate back to the planners at the city level and the developers. This is going to be very powerful.
Yeah, for us, we are always thinking about policy framework and regulation tax industry. We always need help, academic, and we've been searching this for quite some time. Finally, about 6 years ago, we met Dr. Lily Irani with the Workers Coalition, Tech Workers Coalition. One of our board members was given about the workers' right, Mr. Birasishi. And that's how we develop. We have this relationship for a long time, helping the organization how we can innovate and make sure the dignity and respect for textile, because the invasion for the industry is taking off. TNC, Uber and Lyft take off. This project, the idea was always conversational. We have these meetings, community spaces, and the labor side. We have this relationship for a long time, and when this opportunity come, actually, we kind of like, something we worked before. So it's not like something we were looking for at that time. So Udayan, you want to add something about?
Yeah, I can add. I think this also goes back to the conversations we were having on the previous question as well. And we were having this discussion before this panel as well, where I think a key point that people at United Taxi Workers San Diego brought up that has been so successful in them having successful community engaged partnerships is this alignment on values and advocacy on the issues that need first research on, but then also moving policy to realize that change. And I think for us, this alignment on having a fair workplace for taxi workers, having a community-driven technology development process is what has fostered our partnership over time. And whenever we've faced hiccups, we've been flexible enough to adjust our timelines. But I think also what has been super important is not just growing as a community researcher, but also I think through being involved with United Taxi Workers San Diego, also growing as how to participate in city council, how to participate in policy conversations, so that the research that we are doing together, its impact is actually realized in the city yeah, I'll stop there.
We actually had we have an ongoing relationship with Wayne State University, University of Michigan, across the board for all of our different programming. So we work with the University of Michigan as it relates to neighborhood resiliency. And they're actually one of the business support organizations, the Center for Law, Finance and Policy is actually one of our partners in the New Economy Initiative. So when they do their class cohorts, they come to us and say, what businesses could really use help with marketing? What businesses could really use help related to this coursework that we're doing? And actually, I know they were looking at a few different partner options, but the relationship that we built with them over time, supporting businesses, is how we got there. Justin Erickson gave me a call and said, do you all think you would be interested in this kind of research? And we said, sure, it's benefiting our businesses. Absolutely, let's figure it out. So it really comes back to relationships.
And in terms of our project, it is relationships that are fundamental, because my co-PI, Laura Wolf Powers, knew of the work that was happening in Brooklyn with the Brooklyn's Community Collaborative. She thought that it would be a good fit with the design of the RFP. I would say that if you are searching for a way to start, it seems like the university is a good place to start, because lots of universities are in university community partnerships. And so that to me is sort of a leeway into trying to connect with people who may be doing this kind of community-based research. I'm gonna have to sign off in a minute because I have an hour and a half commute to school. I have a class at 4 o'clock, but I've enjoyed everything.
Thank you, Sigmund.
So am I on?
Yes.
Research is very important. One thing that I want to stress, credibility is crucial. It's very important. You identify organizations that have the credibility. The community determines the credibility, not me, the community in general. We find organizations that have credibility and not quote unquote pimping the community, and that could really help you to achieve the objective of the goals that you have to achieve. That's crucial. I call it operational unity too. Operational unity, we have common interests, we unite around that common interest. And that's something that's determined by some research before the research. You know, we have to find out who's out there, who's operating in the interest of the community. And that's what I shared with Alisha and how we came into existence. We knew we have a group called, what's that group called? Well, it's Operational Unity, but it's the Third Ward Community Cloth Cooperative. Third Ward Community Cloth Cooperative, where you find different organizations that have different aspects of serving the community, different ways they serve the community, and they all come together and see how they can strengthen each other. That's the concept. Again, it goes back to operational unity. And that's a key factor in people being able to work together and us being successful and making sure that our research is used properly and all that. I just wanted to put that out there. I know we need to go to another question, but I just wanted to share that with you.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, Deloyd. Anybody else want to hop in before I move us on? Okay. Again, we have really great questions in the chat. I just want to ask one more of the prepared questions we already had before we move on to those. I want to give you a chance to share why this is so valuable from a research perspective. I know that we know this is extremely important in terms of equity and actually moving policy and programs forward in community. But are there any emerging research findings researchers would want to share, or general thoughts on how community engaged approaches can really enrich our understanding from a research perspective about entrepreneurship?
I guess like one thing that was drawing us to this community tech worker model that we're testing out is that over the past years, we've really been interested in the topic of sustainability. So not just like forming a partnership and then it ends and kind of it doesn't really go anywhere, but really understanding how do you kind of build something that's self-sustaining within the community that doesn't rely on you being there for forever. And so that's why we're trying this train the trainer model where like community tech workers can then train the next generation, and can that then be like supported financially by local organizations that are invested in that particular service. And we don't really have the answer for that now, but that's something that we're interested in that kind of like our prior work kind of led us to.
Yes, and to kind of piggyback off on that as well, with our research project, really looking at those tangible investments, community-directed investments within the community to, like Julie mentioned, to leave behind once the research is done, because of the history of viewing things as it being extracted rather than actually strengthening the community, right? And it being focused and targeted on a particular community is the reason that the community engaged research model is very special, because you're building relationships, and you can't engage a community by yourself. You need others. And so it's a team effort. But again, building those relationships and then having the end goal of strengthening that community beyond the research, so that there's even future partnerships, right, to develop in the future for more or whatever can come about those policy recommendations that will be, but that there's a partnership that is even developed for the future work.
What we found out through this process is there's new entrepreneurs joining the entrepreneurship market, startup marketplace. We're talking folks who at one time were either upper middle class or middle class, who are now finding a need to replenish lost income, replenish just the dynamics of their family, the hardship that we've seen over the pandemic. Things might have been nice prior to the pandemic, but now they're coming back to realism that I have to re-hustle my game plan. And that alone, the research we're doing around that is they don't want to be reliant on entrepreneurial support organizations. They think they can go at it on their own. And then they find themselves in trouble and they come to us, and then now we're spending more hours helping them fix what could have been fixed at day one. That's taken a lot of time of our staff to go forward and supporting them.
And I would just add from the research side of what Pedro's talking about in Kansas City, one of the things we're beginning to see is just the neighborhood and spatial dynamics and how that affects people's business model. Where can they find space? What is the quality of that space? Pedro mentioned the entrepreneurial support organizations, and digging into what are those organizations doing in terms of coaching and preparing people to deal with the neighborhood or geographic dimensions of their entrepreneurship. So what we're finding is for the neighborhoods that we've already done asset walks in the commercial districts is for predominantly African American and Hispanic entrepreneurs, the issues of place are much heavier on the success of the entrepreneur because of all the issues from just basic infrastructure to issues of rent and affordability to neighbor dynamics that have really nothing to do with their business model, just who's next door and how is that affecting their business. So we're finding that our initial sort of notion that place matters in terms of entrepreneurial success is really key, and that it also really varies from block to block and neighborhood to neighborhood. So we didn't want to duplicate what's already out there. I know someone in the chat mentioned, how are you making sure you're not duplicating existing research? Well, the way you avoid that is by engaging the community and having them help you co-produce the research questions, and also just observe using participant observation. That's one of the critical things with these asset walks, is seeing it for yourself, the challenges that entrepreneurs face every day in Kansas City.
So I just wanted to weigh in and say, we have some really interesting findings at the beginning, just looking at both the barriers and strategies that entrepreneurs are using. One thing that was interesting is several of them said in their journal, just the fact that I'm journaling has made my performance as an entrepreneur has improved it tremendously, because now I'm cognizant and aware of, thinking through and reflecting more on what I'm doing as an entrepreneur. And so at first I was happy about that, but then I said, now am I changing what they're actually, is my research interfering in a good way? But yeah, I would have to think through that. Another thing, we ask them, entrepreneurs are very hard on themselves. When we ask them about their barriers and we ask them what do they think is causing it, and most of them blame themselves. So there's something there. But one thing that I was really struck by is the fact that how many times mental health challenges came up as an issue in their entrepreneurship journey. And I need to dig a little deeper into that, but we did a word cloud, which kind of, makes the words bigger as more of that word comes up. And mental health challenges are a really big issue among the group that we're looking at. So it's been really interesting so far, also to see how people have different perspectives on coming out of the pandemic. And so, yeah, I think there are some barriers that don't come up in the literature as much. So doing this community-based research, I think having the entrepreneurs help me design the instrument made me ask some questions that I might not have otherwise asked. And so I think that's been really helpful in that way.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I can add some stuff, and then I can ask Mikaiil to add as well. I think one key sort of outcome that would not have been possible is thinking about this question that why couldn't the taxi workers have done it themselves? Why couldn't they have organized themselves, followed labor organizing, and achieved the change in the workplace that they required? And one key difference in taxi work in San Diego is that a lot of their workplace is governed by city policy and state policy. And changing policy requires at least the insights on those changes being packaged as a research outcome so that it reaches policymakers and moves them to actually act on it. And I think a lot of these insights, especially in academia, we put up barriers over them through journal paywalls, through language access, through the spaces that we have organized in terms of conferences, how you can participate in those conferences. So that's one sort of key result that could have only been achieved through this community engaged, community driven model of research. I think one other sort of emerging insight out of this engagement with United Taxi Workers San Diego is that one key gap that we've identified and United Taxi Workers have themselves identified for over 6-7 years is that right now, to be competitive in the on-demand transportation space, having access to an app is really important. But the models of software development we have places a really high value on the people doing the development work, the people doing the coding work, but not enough value on the workers on the ground doing the repair work, just-in-time adjustments, configurations. All of this work is almost invisible to the development work that the developers are doing, coding, building up bespoke models of okay, this is how you would hail a ride. But what happens when there's no GPS, or when your phone dies, or when the payment doesn't go through? All of this work in at least current models of software development is invisibilized, and that's been one of like our roles as researchers, is learning about this and highlighting this whenever there's an opportunity. And I'll ask Mikaiil to add.
So, as you know, you covered it all, Udayan, thank you. As policy change behind with the research always is a goal. You know, we have done it over the years, so many research, about 4 of them, and it was very successful. One of the things actually for the researcher side, you know, as long as they can advocate beyond their paper or whatever research they were doing, and now they can come and testify to the state level, local level, enjoying and saying that this is the product we produce. Over the years, we like SIPCAP, you know, Driven to Despair, we had those guys, they're gone, long gone, but they keep coming back and supporting us with every level we want and advocacy. If they do that, it looks like that something is not accountable as a research, but for them engaging for those kind of research and participating in the community level, that's a big priority. And I can see that the 13 people who participated keep coming back, although they have did whatever they want to do with their research, but still they keep coming back, kind of like ownership. They feeling that this is us, you know, we created this document. That's plus also. I'll stop there.
Okay, anybody else interested in hopping in before I pose the next question? All right, you've all touched a little bit on this, but this is such a good question that I think it's worth addressing directly. I'm going to read this out from the chat. Very much interested in the theme of data equity as it relates to the work you're doing to center equity through research and partnership. So often as grantees, we have limited capacity ourselves in the collection, analysis, and interpretation of data, having just enough to report up to our funders. How are you considering ways to distribute this research down to your partner communities very early on, so they may be the ones to take action on it, building their capacity along the way? So I know you've all touched on this a little bit, but again, even beyond our partner organizations and facing the constraints you are with limited resources, both as researchers and community partners, how are you thinking about sharing data at all stages with the communities you're working within?
I can jump in on that. We organize what we call neighborhood business nights. And so we've done a couple so far this past year. And it was both in terms of mobilizing existing relationships around a new research project, but also this idea of generating trust that Mr. Parker mentioned earlier, and making sure we're asking, you know, really the right questions as we dig into the research. But what that has done is that has also allowed us to understand the view of this kind of research from our entrepreneurs and neighborhood leaders. And the community having that accountability feedback at every step of the way, I guess, is the quickest way to say it. And before you ask the research questions, while you're doing the work, engaging people. And so we've invited neighborhood leaders to participate in the research. We've taken a walk with Pedro and Mikaiil Carmona on the west side to understand the view from the perspective of neighborhood businesses and entrepreneurs on the west side. So I would say really that notion of building in feedback, the issue I think here is reciprocity of benefit, right? And that it's not just we're benefiting from a grant, but what is being produced? What's the knowledge? And even issues of who owns the knowledge, that's already come up. You know, once you produce a report, there's much more knowledge generated. Does that need to go to City Hall? Does it need to go to the county in terms of taxation policy? Does it need to go back to the neighborhoods to talk about neighborhood conflict resolution? There's a lot of different ways that the results, if you will, of the research can actually be co-produced, but also mutually beneficial.
Yes, and I was just going to add too that with the products that our research is striving to produce, Number one, well, we had a kickoff event to share with the community what the research was about. And even at that event, received feedback on what the needs of small business owners within Third Ward are. And then moving forward, having a business appreciation event, as well as someone else mentioned, wanting to do that to give feedback again on the progress of what we're doing. And then also, again, always using that as an opportunity to get their viewpoint and interact with them. We do, myself and my community research assistant go out a lot, and we've done field research, going door to door, storefront to storefront, as you might want to call it, to interact with business owners, talk to them about the project, get their hopefully response to our survey, and to participate in focus groups. And then finally, with a couple of items, the data walk event is an opportunity for them to see the results, which the community research assistants will design and put it in a palatable format so that anybody for the community can understand the results of the data. So that it's not just, only a certain level of expertise can understand data. Let's make it where we can all look at this and say, hey, these are the results, and I can relate to that, right? And so making it accessible. And so ultimately in the end, there will be an online directory, like I said, but there will also be a description of the research and the results all online to be accessible in that format beyond the project. And then a historical map as well is another piece of it that I mentioned, to actually show history and be an educational resource. We see this as an investment, not just in learning about the community, but people, right? And so with the community research assistants, learning about economics and learning about entrepreneurship and ownership of a business themselves while interacting with business owners and looking at data. Then finally, looking at the history, right? And having that be left as young people who live within this community. And when we had that data walk, young people seeing other business owners at that event to say, hey, these are the business owners of my community. These are the people that, hey, I can say, I purchased this from or whatever, but really promoting it in different aspects, economics and educational as well. So those are all investments that we're looking to do and want and are doing.
I think there are some challenges also when you're, for example, my project where they're submitting journals and the business owners are submitting very personal information related to their businesses. And, I've encouraged them to be, as candid as possible. And Richmond is not a big city. And in some instances, the businesses are very innovative or unique. And so it would be easy to find out who they are. So of course, in my research, in my publications, reports, that kind of thing, most of it is at the aggregate level, but it would be very hard. And I can share statistics and aggregated statistics, but it would be very hard to share the actual data without compromising our entrepreneurs. So I've thought about this a lot, and just thinking about how I can share as much as possible, but also protect them as much as possible. So it can also be a challenge in that regard.
To quantify our efforts and our cost in having to shift from brick and mortar technical assistance to our brick and mortar businesses, we did a pop-up event just over the last year since this project started. And so that storytelling is going to be, and that data collection is going to be used by those particular vendors and how the community embraced them. We went with lowriders and pop-up artists that are doing food as well as arts and crafts. That was a little bit touchy for this really reserved neighborhood, a Latino neighborhood that didn't believe that Chicanos belonged in our neighborhood. That was a little bit, I learned that. With the use of Facebook, the use of Twitter feeds, and the number of people just having a great time, it started to change over time from the very first walk we had with Professor Wagner. And we're up to 1,800 folks visiting us on a First Friday event. Facebook, the likes, we're capturing that data from the clients. And then, of course, we know the IRS was very strong in making decisions for Venmo and other online fintech providers. The expenditures that's taken place in this under a bridge in a location of our community. At one time, I always joke and say a year ago, it might have been $1,000 worth of drug activity of economic development being done. But just this last month, we had $19,680 from 37 small business pop-up artists, foodpreneurs, working side by side with the brick and mortar businesses. And that's a significant change. And we share that story with the city of Kansas City, Missouri, because we can now get the tax amount revenues that goes to the city and the health department. And that's the economic data that we need to tell the story of the recovery process for these small businesses and these new businesses that are popping up.
So for us, and I'm not going to speak to how the university is going to use the data. I'm just going to speak on the Jefferson East side specifically. One of the things that came out of this project is canvassing, finding out where businesses are. We identified close to 900 business locations. Of those, a little over 500 that were occupied, and then finding out what was vacant. These are going to be turned into tools where people can go to our website and find where businesses are located in our 13 neighborhoods. This is going to turn into an opportunity for businesses to come to us and say, I'm really trying to find a location in this neighborhood. Can you help us? And we'll be able to leverage this data to help them meet landlords and connect that's really one of the biggest challenges in our community is people are trying to find locations to plug in. So the data is going to be used for the community at large to say, here are the businesses in your community. But then even on a smaller scale for the businesses themselves to say, here are some opportunities for you to move into a retail space.
Yeah, I would say like most of the data is being collected for in service of the community partners. So like when we do interviews, it's useful for us to understand the context, but we're hoping that they're able to use that data to say like write grants or write reports for people in their leadership. One example for in terms of like how we're collecting data, that we make sure that it's being collected in a way that's meaningful to them. So we're using like a project management platform to document all the work that the community tech workers are doing. And we're doing that in the system that the Jefferson East is currently using. Initially, we were thinking of something else, but Lou was saying like, oh, because we're already using the system, our leadership will be able to understand what's going on better if you collect it in this way. So kind of making decisions so that the data is collected in a way that's already in an understandable format and that can be used immediately.
And I would just add for our project here in Brooklyn, since it was sort of built on a foundation of participatory action research, from the first formal one that this group conducted in 2016, they formed a community action and advocacy work group of all of the stakeholders, CBOs, agencies, institutions, leaders to come together to help to launch the research. And then we meet every 6 weeks and have met every 6 weeks until then. And as the research expands to new neighborhoods and or new topic areas, this group incrementally grows. And then spun off another community organization, or it's not necessarily a formal organization, but something called the East Brooklyn Call to Action, which then takes on its own sort of like balloting initiatives and things like that. So we've been lucky enough to have it sort of like built into the structure. And another aspect of it is, as an organization of anchor institutions, we have the City University as one of our partners. So always have this research orientation is very helpful.
I was going to jump in on a question in the chat about the IRB. I know we've talked about that as a cohort before. For those that don't know, that's the Institutional Review Board for Human Subjects Research that most universities are required to have if they receive federal funds, right? So the question was really, how do they look at this kind of work? And I would say in a lot of ways, the IRB is regulatory, and it is about trying to prevent harm to communities. It's what it should be about. Now, as far as their understanding of co-production of research, it's wildly outdated is the easiest way that I could say. The assumptions that inform and infuse the IRB are based off of psychological research in a lab, that they're worried you're doing damage to someone's mind, or that you're causing harm or bringing up trauma related to a personal experience. So the idea of co-creating with a researcher who, like Mr. Zamora or Mr. Parker down there in the third ward, the idea that they have the expertise, not me as the researcher, and that we're going to co-collaborate, it raises all kinds of ethical issues that the IRB really is poorly adjusted to address. And so really there needs to be a revolution of how we think about ethical research practice in the 21st century, because so much stuff happens that is unfortunate, and then the good stuff, it seems like it's hard to get through, right? And because of this issue of community benefits. So what we've really been talking quite a bit about at the Center for Neighborhoods is, what does it look like for us to have a community benefit on many of the things we're doing? Because that's what we're also asking real estate developers, the city, and others to consider. We want them to have community benefits. So why shouldn't the university's research and educational teams also have a community benefits agreement? So that's an ongoing conversation. It could be a whole nother forum, but this idea that the IRB really is too much based on psychology research and not dealing with the complexities that we're talking about right now in terms of co-producing research.
Thank you, Jake. I want to acknowledge we're at time, so we're going to have to close, but I couldn't have asked for a better closing statement. I think you can all agree that all of our grantees here have an immense wealth of knowledge, and we look forward to featuring them again in other forums and other publications so you can learn from them. Thank you again for coming to today's issue forum. We hope you join us at our next month's forum as well. And if you were registered to attend, we will send out a recording of this once it is ready in the next couple of weeks. So thank you all.